Welcome to Shop Talk, presented by ShowChic, where they always put the rider in first place.
Thank you everyone for coming this evening. We hope to have a great discussion. We would like to give you our kind of comments on how we particularly see things or do things, and then at some point we will take some questions. Volume up a little bit?
You just have to speak louder, I think.
Okay.
Oh, help, more volume.
A little more volume?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
We have been teaching all day. Voices are a little tired.
Yeah. So, well, the topic this evening is discussing problems in dressage tests and how to correct those. So I think I'll lead off a little bit with a few things, comments, and then Sarah can jump in.
Probably say who you are, just in case people don't know.
Okay, I'm Lee, and this is Sarah, not the other way around. I think we know who we are. So judging-wise, that's something that I started very, very early, just right out of Young Riders, quite a while ago. I won't say what year. But it was something that I was curious about because I wanted to know how I would receive the scores. And secondly, I always wanted to know in the arena as a competitor, where could I do things that the judges weren't able to see me doing these things that I shouldn't be doing in the first place. So it was very enlightening. But I started at the bottom and worked my way up to get an S card. And then maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I got my FBI license. And I'm going to say that that was the most interesting. Judging here in town, doing maybe 5 shows a season, doing Friday night freestyle, was very, very enlightening to see so many horses, so many Grand Prix horses. And the one season was Rio Olympics, and the Russian judge couldn't make it, so Thomas tapped me on the shoulder and said, Lee, can you do the Grand Prix Olympic trial tomorrow? And I said, yes, of course I can do that. But inside I was like,
panic.
But there were 40 horses, and we did 10 the first day, and then 30 the next day. But what was important about that was to see what I would call trends, statistics, things that would happen, and then over a period of time when you would study this, you could actually know that it's going to happen. So as a judge, watching someone as they would come around the arena and see what the horse looked like and how they were riding it will give you a positive mindset that these are the things that are going to work out well, and perhaps they may show a few little negative things that might happen. So the point about statistics, I think, is really, really important. And first, before I was judging, I'm just a rider and a trainer and then a coach. But from the coaching point of view, having studied those things and had a lot of experience judging, and particularly in the last while, mostly all FEI, huge asset to coaching. Most coaches have a pretty good idea about what happens in judging, and they'll watch their student ride and they'll say, okay, well, I think this is what the mark's going to be, and then they'll watch the scoreboard, and one of the 5 will not be what they thought it would be. But you really have to study these things, and I would encourage you, if you ever wanted to, try and take some of the judging courses. Not that you might think to judge, but they're very, very informative. So why would I get a 6.5, or why would I get a 7, or why would I get a 4? Generally, the entire population has a pretty good idea about that, but there are little things that will occur that will put you in a certain box. And these are not necessarily well known by anyone. And I'll give you just an example offhand. Very, very popular comment, too short in the neck. So if your horse is a stunning, moving type horse, and it's a little bit short in the neck, then you'll still end up scoring 7 or maybe even a fraction more because the quality of the gait is so high. But if that's not the case, then that will put you into a lower marking zone, perhaps 6.5. So little things like that to see trends and to kind of have an idea to know what's going to happen.
Okay.
The most important thing for me I'm going to say, in lessons that I would teach, thinking about judging, thinking about competitions, would be the following. When you get a score, you get a score based on 3 points, three items, 3 principles. Number 1, the quality of the gait. Now, you can purchase a horse with fantastic gaits, but as a dressage trainer, we are supposed to be able to improve what we started with, particularly in the canter, particularly in the trot, and even sometimes in the walk to a small degree. So the first thing that I'm going to look for when you get your mark is quality of gait. The second is quality of the connection from the hindquarter to the front end, the connection. How well is the horse placed through onto the bit? Thirdly, execution of the movement. And that one's the easiest one for pretty much anybody to ride. The first one, we could say, well, it kind of is what it is depending on the quality of the horse that got in the first place. But the second one's the big one. The second one you can control. And the second one will be directly related to how well you can manage your half halts in the ring. So these are the 3 things that I'm going to look for when you get your score. Pass the mic over to Sarah.
We did the one mic thing so we don't speak over each other. That only happens every once in a while. So I'm Sarah. I also am a Grand Prix rider and have had a full barn of clients from all ages and training levels. In my beginning career, I was known as the person that would take any kind of horse in, Friesians, quarter horses, paints, thoroughbreds, all of it. So I appreciate when you hear a judge, and especially an FEI judge, say what the 3 things are that makes your score. And one of the things that are most weighted is that connection. You know, when I'm teaching my students, we're very fortunate, and most of us have some quality horses, especially down here in Florida, right? We can see in the ring that the quality is super high. But all of us have been at the ring and been wowed by some horse, and then they announce the score, and everyone, oh, I can't believe they got a 65. It's everyone's wowed by the horse flying around the arena. So that's a big learning curve for us when we're down here. We're so lucky to be here in Florida, where you guys can sit at the ring, and not only in the national ring, but in the FEI ring, watch horse after horse after horse with really educated judges for the judging the tests. So I try to use this time to educate my students on what is that score, and ask, hey, what do you think that is? And it's funny to see that sometimes our eyes are drawn, as we all know, we're breeding horses now that move with beautiful front legs, and it is a wow movement, but then you have the judge over here sit and go, it's not as good as you guys think, or maybe it felt amazing. I know I've been in a lesson situation and go, oh my God, this has to be a 9. And he goes 6.5. So then I want to kill him, but at the end of the day, he probably is right. And so I think that this is the reason for our conversation tonight. Is it's very important to have a healthy bridge. Most of us do this for the end result of being competitive, or improving on ourselves, or improving the score. And so really understanding what it is they're actually looking for, and making sure that us as trainers and riders understand that, so that we can also help bring along our students correctly, and make sure everybody has a clear understanding of what they are going into that ring with. I know we've all been there, where you go in and go, oh yeah, I'm so prepared, I have this, and you feel like you have one of your best tests, but then you get the score sheet afterwards and go, what the heck, So we really, as a trainer myself, I try to make sure I stay as educated as possible, so that I do send students, and when I go teach clinics, give everybody the most clear information and blow as little smoke as possible. So I think one of the most important things for me as a trainer and as a rider that you heard Lee say is, when they're cantering around the outside of the arena, I already look. So that's very interesting, because when I'm teaching a lesson, most of the stuff that you see that happens in the higher level work, the one tempies, the piaffe, all of that can be seen in the very basic work, walk, trot, canter, and all those transitions that mean something in between. One of the things that I like to do when I go teach clinics in particular, and someone comes to me and says, Sarah, I'm struggling with my ones, or I'm struggling with my pirouettes, or I'm struggling with my piaffe. And I teach a lot of young up-and-coming trainers as well. It's really important, if you ever get stuck, to go right back to the basics. So I always ask, okay, no problem. You feel like you've checked all those boxes, but something's not quite working. So I ask, can you ride for a 70% for training level? Can you ride a 70% for first level? How about second level, third level? And most of the time, somewhere in between there, one of those exercises in those tests that are written like that for a reason, there will be a stopping point. And that stopping point normally, or a failure or a lack of performance, will show up later on in that Grand Prix ring. So I have to admit, I've had horses that hate walk canters. So you know what I did? I don't need to do second level. I'm just going to teach them changes. And I managed to teach them changes. But I got to those darn pirouettes, and all of a sudden my horse won't half halt for a pirouette. So I think it's really important. That's something we want to talk about tonight, is how some of the really small things end up adding up to those large, more difficult things in the end.
I'm going to have to take the mic from her periodically because we're both Leos, so
this will be a long night if we don't.
So I want to give you an example. If I were to think of, for example, a pre-St. George test, and someone comes around the arena. Now, you're not judged when you're coming around the arena, but then on the other hand, I'm not blind either, probably not blind. And so I'm going to look and I'm going to see. And I can't help but see that, oh, you're cantering, and what lead are you on, and what quality of canter do you have? What's the connection like? Little things like that. So let's take movement number 1, because it's actually one of my favorites, and it's in every dressage test. Enter and halt. So the quality of your halt. This is like meeting someone for the first time. First impression. So the quality of the quality of this halt transition. How correct is it? Because this is a direct representation of you and your ability to ride a half halt properly. So if this horse comes into the halt, lowers its croup, sits, softly puts its front legs on the ground, and it's straight and well balanced and square, and you can salute taking one hand off the rein and it stands there almost in complete self-carriage, I'm impressed with this. And now I'm completely optimistic about the rest of the test. Or we could say something different might happen. They enter, they're cantering, it puts in 3 trot steps, 1 or 2 walk steps, comes to a halt with front legs, sand flying, and croup high, overflexed in the pole when they salute, right? So if you think about that, how can this horse possibly transition out of that halt to a trot, turn right, and then do medium trot? So that's an example of what you would see, and then you have a pretty good idea about what's going to happen next. So this scenario of test, that's not an optimistic scenario. So your half halt's not working in movement number 1, and we have 27 more movements coming down the pipe, okay? So positively, when I would see that that can be done, then that's great. So then as the horse continues throughout the test, let's take another movement. Grand Prix, diagonal, extension to V, VKD passage. So a lot of people, when they ride that, they ride movement to movement. They ride, I want to ride start to finish my extended trot, which in theory is correct, except you need a transition at the end of it, and you need to ride the passage. So if you watch this horse and it extends across the diagonal, it may be sitting properly at the beginning, but as the rider pressures it to go further and further, again, remember, if their half halts work and they can keep the horse's weight back in their croup, this is great. But if they can't, and I see as they pass over the center line, the horse's balance point starts to shift forward. Now the transition in V is going to be extremely difficult, if they get one. And then the passage may not develop until well after V, prior to K. This is going to be a problem for whoever's riding, because now they're riding in perhaps panic mode, and the Piaffe transition comes up, and this is not going to be a great transition in. So you can see little things like that. And you will then know that, well, this Piaffe will have some type of a problem, but which one does it have, and score it accordingly. Another favorite one. This one I really like to look for going around the arena, uneven contact. Uneven contact is the kiss of death. So if the rider's riding and has an uneven contact, and statistically speaking, it's too much left rein, tension in the left arm, really too much relaxation on the right rein, and the contact is uneven, the pole's flexed to the left, the neck bends too much, and the shoulder falls out. This is really, really bad. And if you're just cantering around the arena and I see that already in the Grand Prix special and it's 36 movements, it's really bad. But I can't leave because I have to stay in this little box forever and see it through. So uneven contact, as you watch this happen, as someone enters, right away you can say, one half pass will be okay, the other one will not. One pirouette will be okay, the other one will not. The pirouette to the right will not have any bend, and it will labor. The pirouette to the left will happen, but it will be a little bit too big, and it will add a stride. So instead of 6 to 8, it will be 7 to 9, and in some cases even 10. Oh, and those one-time changes, more than likely they're not going to happen. You might get 7. Usually it's 7 to 9 is the miss area, or 9 to 11. Somewhere in there, there'll be some kind of a problem. And this you can see before you even get started. So things like that, when you think to like studying your lessons and you're working, you can have a problem or you can have a mistake, but you have to make sure that you don't have a fundamental mistake. Okay? Maybe your circle's a little bit too big. Oh, 9 meters instead of 8. But don't have uneven contact. Will you talk for a bit?
I mean, you can keep going if you want. Go on ahead. Yes, this is our life, by the way. Our poor clients know the feeling. So I think the other thing that's important to talk about tonight, because not all of us are at the point where we ride Grand Prix tests, or a lot of us have young up-and-coming horses and everything, I think you'll notice that we often talk about that because in our barn or most of our lives, no matter where you're at, all of us are looking for what is that highest level I possibly can go. So again, coming from very small beginnings, I rode mostly off the track thoroughbreds starting off. So it was about how correct can you ride, and we often say it, how can you make no mistakes, right? So we all have seen quarter horses out there doing Grand Prix, thoroughbreds out there, Friesians, Shires. So it is possible with really correct training. And one of the things that we like to say in our program is, what is the fastest way that we can get to that final Grand Prix test without pressuring the horse, and sometimes without them even knowing that we're working on making them Grand Prix horses. So I really love riding young horses and bringing young horses along. So one of the things that we like to do, and I think this is also important when you talk about dressage tests, and as he said, as in the halt, so that's very much in the beginning. You might be in the round pen teaching your horse how to halt, walk, trot off, walk, trot transitions. So a lot of this is just the way you think about things in the beginning so that you don't have to fix very simple things later on. So you don't come into a clinic with one of us and we go, what is the halt? And you start all over. Or like I said, who needs those walk, canter transitions? I'm just going to throw a change on it. That did bite me in the butt later on. So it's really important, again, the way you think about things and the theory of things. So moving on from one of the other most common mistakes that happen in dressage tests is actually nothing to do with any movement that's judged, but the corners. There are 4 of them, and how often do we have to go through them, starting at training level and all the way up? Now, a lot of times in the beginning, you're on the young ones and you can bomb around those corners and it doesn't really matter, but let me tell you, when you do get to a Grand Prix dress, you pray for your next corner, because that is the only, well, and that is the only preparation you have for the next movement. So as you move up the levels from training level all the way through Grand Prix, you will notice how the tests are written. There's less and less time in between to recover. So one of the only places you have a chance to recover, rebalance, gather your thoughts, half halt, all of the things, is the corner. So in our program, we really stress riding correct corners. So that's a place that you're correct.
You want to explain how that happened to you?
Well, there were Amazon cones bought.
$12.
lots of Amazon cones.
$12
that got run over a lot first, but and they are still in our barn, those Amazon cones. But it's really important, that's something very simple, that it doesn't matter what shape, what breed, what level horse you're riding. You can come in the ring and you can ride a perfect centerline, halt, and first corner. So there you go, you've already ridden the first part of your test, given him a good first impression, and set yourself up for success. The other thing about those darn corners is the corner, if you're talking about coming from a trainer, or I like to call myself like a personal trainer for your horse, every corner is a strength training exercise for your horse. So a corner is half of a 10-meter circle. A corner has the same feeling as a half pass and the same feeling and muscles that the horses have to use for a pirouette. So Mr. Judge over here will watch you canter through a corner and watch your horse almost lose a lead and struggle on the way out, and I'm pretty sure he's not pretty sure you're going to get a really good strong pirouette. So those are something in your daily training that's not difficult on your horse's body. It's not difficult for any of us, no matter what level you are, to ride a really correct corner, and that's a very simple push-up exercise that your horse can do without even knowing that they're doing anything hard. We should probably ask for some questions so we don't just keep talking these people's ears off.
Okay, in a minute. It's not question time yet. So those are all very good points. Another one I think would be when just randomly thinking about it, a mistake. A lot of people, when they make a mistake in the test, something goes wrong, and you watch them, I can actually kind of get an impression from them, maybe a facial expression, something like that, oh no, that's not good. And what will end up happening will be one of a couple of scenarios. One, let's say that there's a mistake in a line of changes. Whatever you do, don't try and make that up. Just continue to ride well, ride the next movements well, because I'm going to tell you that is a statistic. Anybody that has a large error like that, a mistake, or walk and canter pirouette, and then they try to make that up, it never goes well for them.
Override.
They try a little too harder, they put too much stress on the horse gets tense, and then the movements thereafter, the next 4, 5, or 6, they're not really of a great score. So that would be one thing to I would recommend. If there's a mistake, isolate it to that particular movement, move on with your life, forget it. Another one, if I have to ring the bell and you have an error of course. Now, when I do this, before I ring the bell, I'm going to double check that I'm going to ring the bell properly and you have made a mistake. I don't want to, oops, that's really bad, and mess you up. So I'm going to double check. Yes, you made the mistake, boom, there's the bell. And then I want to speak very clearly, in few words as possible, what it is that you need to do. So when you recover from this and you think, okay, Lee said, I've got to go back to K is the canter departure, not V, then take your time and set your horse up. Because on many instances, I see two scenarios. One, somebody literally panics because I told them that they need a canter. They're looking at me at X. They make the canter departure at X, go back onto the track, and there's no canter departure at K. That's problematic, okay? So start, organize yourself, and make sure that it's clean from right where you're supposed to start, and then carry on. Because sometimes most people don't do this, and you can kind of see the anxiousness, or they're worried or afraid, or they're upset they made a mistake. So if you do get an error, of course, make sure that you take your time, start properly. We don't mind. We don't want you to hurry into it. We don't want a second one. Another interesting word, kind of thinking about just words, would be the word average. So when I grew up, the word average was kind of like, oh, that's bad, I don't want to be average. But dressage tests are simple accounting. It's accounting. How many points can I get per movement? And it's much better that you would think to have a smooth, accurate, consistent test from start to finish, with perhaps a variation of a 0.5 point, 7.5, maybe down to 7. Your worst movement was 6.5, but you're really, really quite consistent. This is important for two reasons. One, yes, you're riding a test, you want points, you're trying to get a certain color of ribbon, but never forget, each test you're riding, you should still be training your horse. So if you make a bad decision and you try too hard, for example, extended trot, push too much, so this usually happens, and I'll watch that, and right off the bat, this looks good, and I'm satisfied. And then you have to take into account, even though they harrow the arena, everybody halts at X. So the footing density at X has been compromised by so many people halting there. you push your horse to maximum, flames are coming out the rear end, and that horse puts its left front foot in the hole at X and loses rhythm and becomes irregular. And that's unfortunate. And then usually in the box we're like, right, that's unfortunate. So average means be careful that you wouldn't do that. And go for a consistent score that start to finish, everything is smooth and clean. When she rides a test, I always say one thing, like it's a jumper round, go clean. Keep it smooth, make everything correct as is possible. If it's going well, add a little bit more, but always ride and make it a super clean test. Because when you add up all those numbers, that's going to make a big difference. And the last general impression mark is a reflection of what we saw happen throughout that test. If it's consistent, that's going to be a little bit of a bump score compared to if it is inconsistent. So don't do things that would allow us to say, I can't give you a good mark because. Take that away from whoever is judging you. Your turn.
Well, I think that last part is really important coming from a trainer and a rider. I think we've all ridden a test where we've gone, well, I'm just going to gallop him down the long side so he knows to go forward. And then the next test you get bolted and taken off with, right? And then the next test you have to double check him and check him back. And so you've lost ground instead of gained ground. So one thing we always tell our students is, win every movement. So it doesn't always mean that maybe to the outside eye that it looked like, oh man, this was a beautiful test. But we always say when our students come out, like, did you win? Do you have more scoreboard, more scores, more points? Caffeine, it's been a long day. More points on the scoreboard than your horse. So that's a little bit of a different view than maybe talking to the judge who wants us to get over 70, where at that point when I'm coaching my student, I don't really care what score you got. I want you to go in there and whatever we were working on at home, I want to see that you won. You kept riding like we do at home. Same sand here in this sandbox as it is at home. And I think as far as a trainer and a rider, that's really important because like I said, sometimes I've let something go, I'll just let them drift a little bit here or end a little early here, and they don't do it better next time. So you lose a little bit of ground that way. So I think that when you talk about showing, and especially here in Wellington, it's a little bit abnormal compared to the rest of the country or a lot of the world, maybe besides Europe, is rarely can you show literally every weekend and sometimes even during the week, which is insane. So I think when you're showing like that, sometimes we all get carried away about, oh, we're showing, we're entering, we're here, we've got to do it. And you have to think about the why and what the last few tests actually did for your training. That's really important. And sometimes we have to have tests where maybe we're not going to walk away with the blue ribbon, but we walked away with a blue ribbon in our mind because it was really important for the training. So I think that's really important when you're in an environment like this, that you don't get carried away with going for the 9 and then you go home in the summer and your horse is falling apart and you have to kind of retrain it so that you're ready to come back here again. So again, these tests are put together as a test of skill and a test of the level you're at. They're not supposed to be easy. They're not really set up to like show off most horses. So I think that that's the thing, in our training also, that there's a lot of horses that are not as talented at the lateral work, or hey, it's really hard to make a horse small and then make them big and then make them small again. And a lot of the times, especially when we go in clinic, we'll hear, well, we try to stay away from this exercise because it's not good for my horse. He's not good at it, so I need to only work on this. Well,
wrong.
USEF did not get that memo. USDF did not get that memo, and that test, none of those tests are set up so it's easy for most of us. So a lot of these tests are set up as a test or a challenge to the training. So I think when we're training on a daily basis, we all have to think about making our horses athletes and as well-rounded as possible. So I think we should probably stop talking for a minute and let everybody digest that a little bit and see if there are any questions, and really challenge this man a little bit because he needs that. So come up with somebody come up with a good zinger question. So any questions, anyone?
Has anybody had a lesson with me?
Oh, yeah.
Survivors,
Well, like
I see.
the corner
Okay.
to the left.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to expand a little bit on what Sarah was talking about when someone's writing a test and what we mean by did you win. What this means is we have a horse and we ride it all the time, it's ours, and we call it our partner. Except they don't always do what we want them to do. So, and they will always tend to not do what we want them to do in front of the biggest audience at a horse show. So when you ride your test, what she meant by winning is can you ride the first movement, the halt, and make the halt as I described earlier, it's straight, it's square, it's well balanced. And let's say that you get 7 for that, okay? So that's movement 1 of 28. Oh good, you won that. What about movement 2? Diagonal extension. Can you keep the horse extending in a very good balance with 2 nice transitions? Got it. He listened to you or she listened to you. Won that. So when you go through the whole test, that's more or less what's happening. Until you get to a certain point of reliability, maybe this is several years later, you've had the same horse for 2.5 years or 3 years, and then you really are actually a partner in the ring. Now these are the tests that you will watch and observe that are very enjoyable because they have a tremendous amount of harmony. There's a ton of cooperation. It looks fun for the horse, looks fun for the rider. So this idea of what is the competition? Well, the competition is between you controlling yourself and the horse you ride and controlling it and making it listen to you. And if that all works, now the competition is you lay down a great score that everybody else has to beat. So that's one thing to kind of like to talk about. And when I ride a horse and I think like that in competition, as I ride the test, that's how I think. To try and guide and direct that horse in a proper way that at the end they would listen. Now, when I'm judging, part of what she said, I may have judged you before or maybe not. I don't know you. So when you ride, you might be competing against this idea where you need the horse to listen to you and be cooperative. You may be riding to try to better your score from the last show. But I don't know that. So all I can comment on is what I see. And I try and do that in a very benevolent, somewhat rider, trainer, coach, sympathetic way, but still make you accountable.
You're only sometimes mean.
Only sometimes. Only sometimes. Okay? But that's really important because, and also I'm not going to write much on your test. I'm going to be direct. That's what you need to do. A comment and closing remarks. No Chronicles of Narnia from me. Okay? So when you think about that, when you ride, and am I riding? I would always ride to train well, to train the horse well, because it sets it up for the next class. When you watch some of these horses that do very well, and whether it's training level or it's Grand Prix level, but the horse is super obedient, really nice in the connection, really obedient, that horse is set up for its next test. If you have the opposite of that, or you have some kind of a conflict, this conflict usually cannot be resolved in a 24-hour period, and then I'm going to see you again. So that level of harmony is important. We also need to think too about our marks. Harmony, when you would watch this ride, this is the mark of 8. It's 8 or it's more. This is the zone of harmony. Harmony equals 8 or more. And when we watch some of the freestyles or even the Grand Prix test, and the horse is very, with the rider, nice contact, lots of harmony, these are the great ones to watch. For us as a judge, they're so much fun. Thinking about training at home, well, for me, number 1, half halts. This is our language that we use to speak to the horse. And we, like any foreign language that you might learn, you learn some words, the bad words. Then you can say a phrase, and then you can formulate a sentence. And then over time, you become fluent. That's a half halt. So when we start out, we can't really understand how to do this. We evolve into doing it, but probably mostly incorrectly. Then we evolve into, I kind of get it, and then we're really riding it properly. So at home, we ride thousands of transitions. And I've got a nice, long, beautiful list in the coaching string of transitions from A all the way to the end of the alphabet.
The peanut gallery's laughing over there.
And all of the things that I would ask you to do in a lesson come from the highest test you would ride. So perhaps you're riding second level, perhaps you're riding third level or training level. But you should know where it is that you're going. So I would like to look at what's the highest level that I could achieve and then work my way back to where I am. This is my path to get there. So when I'm coaching, even if you're riding training level, I'm going to make some references. I'm going to ask you to do A, B, C transition, and here's why. Because if this horse is talented, and if it works out for you, and if you do get to Grand Prix level, you need to be able to do that. So I want to plant that seed at an early stage. When I was growing up and we rode small tour St. George I-1, we did that. And we would do that for like 3 years until it was solid, or you're bored doing it. And then eventually the conclusion was, okay, great, now what? I've done I-1 for 3 years, let's do Grand Prix. Yeah, but your horse is 13 years old and you've done no piaffe and no passage with it, right? So it's called too late. So the younger horses, we like to give them specific, simple exercises within their reach or capacity, physically or mentally, but we want to make them smart. And you can really see this in the show ring. Is the horse a great physical athlete? Yes or no? Okay, yes. Is this horse intelligent? Yes or no? Now that's a very interesting question to ask when you judge it, because a lot of horses, when you see one that's really well trained mentally, they figure things out and they have a positive level of anticipation. They kind of know what's coming next, but they have that little pause and they wait for their rider to cue them, to tell them to do it. And once in a while they'll save the rider's bacon. But the other horse who's not been taught to think within the test, just punch the time clock and yep, oh, yeah, movement 23, I'm done now. And they will check out on you, or they will not be that cooperative, or they will not help you. Oh, I switched leads behind, yes, I will cross canter forever. So that's also an interesting thing when you're training. Train the horse to be not just a physical athlete, but make them smart. And to do that, you have to give them puzzles or tasks to figure out. The other thing that I think that would be quite important, we do have a rule book, and everybody should read that. You should, if you make a mistake, you should look at me and say that I've rung the bell and I'm wrong, although that did happen once. And I did nearly have to get a lawyer to say it says M to V, not M to K. But she said I wrote that test yesterday and it was M to K, and I said, okay, well, I wasn't there. But you should know all the rules, and you should be also reading what the criteria is that we look for, because I'm going to say that most people don't really know that well. So that would be a helpful thing to be thinking to do when you're training at home.
Well, I think, Mr. Talkative, you should ask somebody a question, because you're good at that. So if
Does
no one
anybody have
has
any
questions, then
Okay.
you have to ask it.
Okay,
I would
yes.
encourage to ask questions before he asks.
Can you give some examples of some of the puzzles or questions that you would ask them?
Timing, coordination of activities, to ask the horse with a varying degree of timing, to
have to
ask
be
them
more
to do
specific.
something too quickly. And sometimes inside of a little bit of an argument, when the horse isn't that supple or it's not going that well,
I can answer that too.
to ask them to do that anyway. Because you will never have often an ideal circumstance. It will never be, oh, this is perfect and I will add that cue. So as an example, I might cue the horse a little bit too early, or I may cue the horse a little bit later, or optimally in the middle. So just changing the timing with which you would ask. And then you can also, the quantity of aid. Like, what quantity of aid do you like? What quantity of aid would you like? So I would like any horse that I would ride optimally to respond to this pressure. So my canter departure would be weight placed on my inside seat bone, inside my half-halt aid, and that's about it. So small aid, tiny aid, lots of finesse. That's the question.
Well, no, I can answer that a little more directly.
Okay. Please answer it more directly.
I know. This is my life. This is our life. Don't worry.
Meanwhile, at NASA,
Yeah. Right. An example, a more direct example, is something that we do when we're teaching horses flying changes, or if we have a horse that we're trying to clean up tempi changes or make the ones a little more direct, is we will do walk, counter canter, immediate flying change, almost before the horse is ready.
It's like a one-time change.
So it's the same thing as a one-time change without doing 100 million one-time changes, which is very hard in the horse's body. Right, yeah, see, it's okay, I can make it more simple. I know what he means by this now, years later. But so something simple like that, that's a gymnastic exercise for the horse, and it also, we use this often for the riders too. You're trying to teach students how do you ask for ones? Well, most people move your legs faster. Well, that's not very helpful when you've never ridden ones. Move your right leg faster. Again, unless you have my physio in the back, you're also not gonna know how to do that. So doing the walk, counter canter, immediate flying change, you can do that on either lead. You'll notice one side you can't get it. It'll be, if you watch in the mirror, it'll be 2 strides before you get the change, or it'll be when you can get it on the immediate strike off, that's your one-time change. That also, and then that also trains the horse to be a little bit quicker. So then everybody's on that same quicker aid without having to whip more, kick more, do more. And so that's an example of what we do on a daily basis with our horses that makes the horses sharper, it makes the students sharper, and it is not wear and tear on the horse. And if you think about that, you can do that with a 3rd level horse. You don't have to wait till they're Grand Prix. So stuff like that is stuff we do to help speed up the process by making the horse quicker and more gymnastic, and teaching our students what they need later on before they even know that they're doing that. I think you had a question.
Any questions?
As a judge, if you have a rider that is snowballing of problems, do you prefer it excuses himself?
Did they leave? Yes.
No. No.
Inside place there. Okay, repeat the question,
No.
please.
As a judge.
As a judge.
Do you prefer if they excuse themselves, if they have really like one problem after the other, or you prefer to see them really fighting until the end?
That's kind of an interesting question, because it could go both ways, because it depends on the circumstance. If it's a little bit of difficulty and you can kind of see that this isn't the first time that this has happened, then I try to be compassionate and allow them to go as much as I can within the boundaries of my rules that I have to follow. So I want, like in jumping, they can take a last fence, so to speak. I don't want them to leave on kind of a sour or bad note. Now, if it's going to be unhealthy for them and it's dangerous, you must go now. You can't stay, okay? So, but I would always try to go ahead. And even sometimes when it's not a high-pressured show and something's happening and they excuse themselves, I might say, look, you paid for 5 minutes, so go ahead and use it. I'll go get a drink or something and come
Look
back.
away.
And when
Look
I come
away.
back, you must go. So, it goes both ways. So if it's just risky, then no, that's not good. But if it's something kind of, they're trying to work through, then I'm okay with that. At Global, no, you must go immediately. At White Fences, you can stay for a little while. Any other questions?
What for you is a good mouth, and what is a bad mouth?
Mouth?
Mouth, yes, a very good question. This is one of the things I love to look at. And my favorite is when I get a horse in the ring, really nice round through, and I look at the double bridle, and the curb chain isn't embedded into the chin of the horse. And the shanks have some little movement, like a shutter or a saloon door slightly, moving back and forth, and I see that the rider doesn't have a death grip on the horse's mouth. And I look for little wrinkles at the corner of the mouth from the snaffle, and I want to see life in the bit, life like lungs inhaling and exhaling, that the rider is clearly contracting, compressing the horse in a half halt, and then clearly softening. And I want to see these jaw muscles relax and the mouth really quiet and closed. That is a thrill, and that is rare. But when I see that, and the movement's really good, I get my wheelbarrow of big points out. 8, 8.5, 9. If I'm 9.5, it's a 10. So, but that's a really good question. I love that. But going the other way, mouth open, space, tongue doesn't even have to be out, but you can see all the stress. And you look at the reins, and the reins are like cables to a telephone pole holding it up. Not good. So let's speak about that, because there would be some people that I've judged, and then I walk through the VIP and I might hear them say, oh, I just had the best test ever. I'm so happy. Got 71 in St. George, let's say. And I'm thinking, 71 in St. George? Oh, I judged this class. And then I think about who that was. Like, no, I start to cry because you could have gotten 75. So if you focused on how well you have halted, and we think about the two parts of that, because there's two parts, contraction and relaxation. If we give relaxation a title, it's called self-carriage. So knock my socks off with your self-carriage. Show me how well your horse sits, how well it's on your core and seat, and not in your hand. These are lovely tests to judge. They're high-scoring 70%, and they're 80% in the Grand Prix. Awesome question. Someone in the back had a question?
Yeah, I did. It's kind of a follow-up of whatever. Earlier on, you spoke about the comments that said tight in the neck or short in the neck, and then you said there are 3 criteria, and the second one was about
Connection. Yeah.
So, or connection, sorry. So, how do you, if you see a horse that's tight in the neck or short in the neck, what does that tell you about the contact?
Great question. Normally with this, there are other things attached to it. So let's say, for example, I'm just finishing signing off. Someone comes around the ring. Nico is announcing who it is, and then I look up. And if I look up and I see an overflexed pole, chin close to the chest, I'm also going to see 1 or 2 other things. The second, croup, pelvic structure not flexed and coming under, so the lumbar spinal musculature not cooperating. Hocks out into the tail. Often, the rider's leaning too far back. And those 3 things seem to go together. Because they lean too far back, the reins are too long. They do not clearly half halt. They will end up holding onto the rein for too long a period of time. The horse has 2 choices. It can, if it's a younger horse and sensitive, freak out and will not accept this contact. If it's an older horse, it will passively resist the rider. How does it do that? Overflexes its pole. So it retracts its neck back into its shoulders and just goes with what it's got to do. But this rider will also at the same time be riding their breeches off, they'll leave the breeches, and they'll be riding with so much leg forcefully, right? And this is an entire conflict. So when you asked about that, that's not necessarily that they have a problem throughout the test, but just that the connection's so difficult. So that overflex pole means the haunches are out behind, 99.99% of the time. Hang on.
And I'll say that's really important. This is something as a younger trainer coming up and everything, that it's very easy to overlook that even with your students. And this is where I said that maybe you send somebody into the ring and, oh, they get all their changes and they get their half-pass, and you got it all, and then we're disappointed that it's a 62 or it's a 63. Ah, darn stingy judges, you know? And a lot of times, to be honest, these are these fabulous moving horses that we're breeding and buying now too. And that's why again, if you can in your program, it's so important to focus on that really true connection, because it's not that you can't have a fabulous moving horse. That's a jazz, have plenty of them, and they are naturally built with a shorter neck or a more closed throat latch, but they can still be ridden really correctly. It takes a little more skill, and I think as a trainer and even as a coach, you know, buying horses for my clients, buying horses to bring here to sell, I think it's important that, you know, when you buy a fabulous moving horse like that, and it does seem nowadays that they are built a lot with shorter necks, it's just the breeding right now, the training is so important, because it's not that they can't be ridden correctly with the frame correctly, but I think this is where, as a coach, you have to really be true to yourself and your clients and make sure you're not just going and letting them fly around the ring with the horse's neck short, because sometimes nobody even knows. Nobody knows until you go into your test and the bottom of the test says 6, neck too short. What? My neck was too short? You know, so this is an education point that I think is really important, and I hope everybody takes away from that, like the mouth question and the connection is we have to train these horses to the best of our ability without any negative side effects. So it is a talent to teach a horse Grand Prix. I don't care if you did it, hats off to anybody. I don't care how good or how bad, because that is difficult no matter what. But it's a true talent, and it's very difficult to do it without making mistakes. And one of those mistakes, the mouth, the contact, tension, all of that. So that's where, we were really lucky to go to Europe this summer and to see all of some of those amazing riders, and see what the difference is between a 70 and an 80 over and over and over again. And the 80 is beautiful, soft contact, horses nose out to the vertical, and harmony. So I think that's one thing I think if everybody can take away from tonight is don't forget about that. Don't get carried up in the Wellington, I've got to train up harder, trot bigger, get to the next level. Like, it really is about the horse being happy and ridden correctly, and don't forget about some of those basics, which is really why we do dressage.
And that's a good point. And I remember first time I went to Europe, that was a very stimulating thought, because going over there and watching, from the get-go, most riders, when they started, it was good from the beginning. And that was hard to figure out. I just thought, well, better horses, but that wasn't it. So when I came home, having my own barn and wanting to study these things, what I came to notice is, in the 3 phases of the ride, being that the beginning, the middle, and the end, and even if I was teaching a lesson to someone, generally by the end, you have stuff sorted out. Good job. But that takes 45 minutes. And then when you get good at it, the middle is quite good. And then you're happy because you have the middle and the end. Now your warm-up at the horse show, well, it's a few minutes less. But the real goal should be, how correct can you be at the beginning? Nobody ever taught me that or asked me that question, but I thought of it one time on my own in Canada, in my little indoor arena, riding my 10 horses in that day in the cold. Because you think a lot up there because there's nothing else to do. Coffee or drinking. So I thought about that, and I thought, why is the start so difficult? And the reason the start was difficult is because I had no expectation to be correct at the beginning. Nobody ever said that was important. Walk around the long rein, doing nothing, walking around. Then take up the reins. Then trot around in rising trot with some kind of contact. Maybe you make 2 transitions, change direction, canter around, take a walk break. 18 minutes later, now I'm ready to work. But if you look at it from the point of view of quality or content, or what did the horse get out of that? There was no, when you talked about like puzzles, there was no mental challenge to that. There was no expectation. So as a result, there's no expectation at the beginning. There was no significant performance at the beginning. So thinking of that differently, then I changed. And I like to do a ton of walk at the beginning. It's easy, but I want to make sure that everything's explained. And I want to be sequential from one step to the next, correctly. And I would like to feel I've maximized the potential of what I could do in a walk on any given day. I've got 99% what I could squeeze of this lemon with this horse. Now I'm going to trot. Well, when I begin trotting, now my trot starts from a 99% quality. So not much in life scares me, but warming her up at a show is scary. Okay?
14 minutes.
We're down to, like
16 minutes,
18
14.
minutes worth of warm-up for a Grand Prix test. Like, oh my God, that's really scary. But on the other hand, we train for that. So when we start out, we don't have arguments. The first
Either of us, the
off,
horse or me, or him.
the first strike off the canter is really a correct collected canter to start with, right? So we don't have to repeat that. So we're trying to reduce the period of time with which we would repeat something, which will consume time and energy. Energy is very important. So living in Canada and teaching and coaching for a lot of years, I had an analogy, and it would be in a lesson. Hey, look, you need to do this right the first time if you can, because if you're in a really hot environment, right? And so now here we are in a really hot environment.
Riding a big red stallion. Doesn't like it.
I'd probably say that very many, if there were 20 people in the class, probably 6 to 8 tests were in the warm-up arena. They're left in the warm-up arena. And the horse is presented to me, and it's done. It doesn't have enough energy. So one time at dinner during a clinic a gazillion years ago, I don't remember who the person was, eating and having dinner, this lady leaned over and she said, I want you to tell me, meaning like when I was in Germany, I turned over a rock in a mountain And Herbert Rabine wrote, she said, I want you to tell me how to train my young horse successfully, quickly. And that was eating salad. That's all I remember, eating salad. And I leaned over and I looked at her and I said, don't make mistakes. And then she just was glazed over. And I thought, uh-oh. And that she couldn't comprehend that. She was waiting for some valuable piece of information. But if you think of it that way, in fact, that's true. So what is my warm-up? I want to get on whatever horse it is and sort of whatever it is they're not good at, come to a conclusion that, yay, they're not making any more mistakes. They can write the exam and answer the questions properly, and now we're going to move on. So that's an example of making your horse smarter or more intelligent. And it's a lot of fun when you see them pick up on that. They get on the mounting block, take up the reins, they walk away, they drop their neck, it's not stressful. I make a couple of half halts down the long side, they're like, yeah, okay. And that's my start. So one of my first best horses, like Sarah said, was an off-the-track thoroughbred mare. And she was actually a really nice horse. But back then, because I was younger, it was very difficult. And it would take well over 20 minutes just to get her round on the field. Okay? So at a certain point, my mom said, I'll buy you a better quality horse. So I went to a sales barn, I rode 13 horses that day. And the one I bought was the one at the mounting block that I picked up the reins, and he went,
sold.
Right away, I'm 20 minutes ahead. And the second reason was his normal trot was medium trot. Right? So training an off-the-track thoroughbred to extend, I did it, but it was really difficult. So that was kind of like my first one.
So one of the things he said is really important, and I take this to heart when I'm training, is to do what's not easy for the horse. You know, because we are their personal trainers, right? And it is important for the horse to have fun and to do things well. But a lot of times I'll go teach a clinic and someone says, I have to trot my horse on a long rein for 20 minutes. Okay, and again, we go back to our warm-up. Okay, why can't you pick up the contact, and what can we do? Now, I'm not going to say, oh, rip on him and make it happen now, right? But it's really important in your training that you think about what the horse can't do well, and we're their physios, we're their personal trainers, we're all they've got. And so every horse has a positive and a negative to them, or things that they're good at, or things they're not. So again, in trying to maximize your training time, is you got to think about the why, and then we try focus gently, but in a systematic way, on what's difficult. So sometimes those are difficult lessons, and it's maybe not as fun as if I said, oh, you love extended trot? Your 45-minute lesson is extended trot, and you think you're a rock star. But then you go to your horse show next weekend and go, why isn't my score any better? Well, I let you extend the trot for all week, you know? So that's something that's important as trainers, is that we try evaluate each horse and rider combination and gently make our program to make things easier that are not. Oh, a question. Yes.
Oh, go.
Yay, good. So we stopped talking. Come on.
Sarah, what do you tell your students to do outside the ring to prepare themselves, and listening to the bell, and then it's like, when there's the bell, and you have to stay focused? And for Lee, when you mentioned that you caught an impression of the horse before they enter day, like, what's the thing you would like to see or not want to see?
I think that really depends on the horse and rider combination and what they're going through at that given moment in their training. I myself, and for my students, you got to go around the ring and be as effective as possible. We've all done it, and we've all seen it where someone, and some judges, I know you don't like to write chronicles, but a lot of judges sometimes take some time, things happen, and you're loping around the arena for 3 times around without your trainer telling you to do transitions, and all of a sudden you don't know why your halt is a llama who's spread apart, right? Well, you just cantered 3 times around having no conversation whatsoever with your horse. So when I've had a horse myself, when I've had a horse that I've been with for a while, and it's my partner and I know, well, I go in there to say, look at me. So I do, I go around, but at the same time I'm asking them questions, you know, moving them off the leg, sending them a little bit forward, asking them questions. So the whole time it's not all of a sudden we go from the warm-up ring to the show ring, right? And how many of us have told their trainers or said, I have a different horse in the show ring. Well, that is not your horse. He doesn't know the difference between this ring and that ring unless you told him. So that's something that's important, especially when you have a new horse, is that you make an impression on your horse also when you're going around. There is no difference between this white fence and that white fence. So as a trainer, when you talked about the rider's mental state, I make sure all my students go and sit by the ring before they ride. I'm a big believer in visualization, kind of being in the moment. We practice tests a lot at home. We don't practice it with the bell, but I don't think I have anyone right now with a bell thing yet. But I know sometimes that's a source of anxiety for someone. I believe in sports psychologists, so a lot of time there's exercises you can do to put yourself and make yourself at ease in that moment. But I always feel like for anxiety, for showing, it's just preparation. If you feel really prepared with a plan, I mean, you might be anxious about what's going to happen, but you have a plan. So again, it just depends on the horse, depends on the combination. You know, if your horse has a beautiful canter or is struggling with the trot, you know, you kind of think about what's best to set it up for your center line. You know, that's what you're doing going around there. And then what was for you? She had a question for you. Sorry.
Yeah, what do I want to see going around the arena? Well, you can't help when you're judging, for example, here at Global National, to see the warm-up arena. So the next horse in the ring, standing at the fence watching the previous horse go, doing no type of warm-up, it's not good. You're not prepared, you're not really going to be ready. It won't be an optimal performance unless the horse is like super excitable and you're just trying to calm him down, but that's rare. Other little things. Don't walk around my ring. Nothing makes me ring the bell faster than someone walking around the arena. You're supposed to perform, trot or canter, show me, like inspire me. Oh, I want to judge this.
Unless you're Stefan.
Not walking, not walking around the
just
arena.
saying.
Okay? And then to be direct to your question, just don't make mistakes going around the ring. So when I think back, like you referenced Aachen, for example, what was Andreas' horse he rode in the Grand Prix?
Jovian.
Jovian. So when you see Jovian, it's like, oh, wow, wow, that's an impressive looking horse. But in his test, he had like problems with tension and some things were still, the piaffe was still green for him. And then you look at Catherine Dufour's horses, and I wouldn't say that if I didn't know anything and I just walked by a warm-up arena, this is not a horse that wow. However, that horse was a little Swiss watch. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. So you see when you would watch Jovian go around the arena, you're really impressed with the look of the horse. But then there were problems in the test, okay? And then when you would watch her ride around the arena, that was very interesting because we sat together and I'm making her watch. And then I'm validating all the things that I've said over the last 2 years, right? Particularly about the contact.
The contact.
And
okay, I get it.
There was so much harmony there. And you see when you would watch her go around the arena,
it's not wow,
wrong?
yeah, but
nothing's
it's
wrong. The only thing that's wrong is how powerful and expressive is the horse in his gait, if he trots or if he canters. Because watching Jovian go around is like, wow, that's pretty impressive. But he only got, I think, 74, and she got 80.
83
but
or something,
yeah. So many of her points because of the quality of the training, the quality of the connection, not because of the world beater class horse, and the quality of the contact. Those
the contact's
are really
beautiful,
nice to watch.
yeah.
And one thing I pointed out to Sarah was the reins only move like this, and most of the time,
only
the reins
forward.
went that way.
Yeah.
Not coming back. But I can tell you how that happens. A million transitions at home. Walk, trot, 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 transition gait, transition within the gait. And what do we really call this? That was the perfection of her half halt. She perfected her half halt. So any squeeze or variation, that horse would do. That's called gymnastic training. And that's what's different about dressage than other types of training. So, you know, going around the ring, don't show me any mistakes, show me quality, make me interested. Make me wonder which way is this going to go. And then further to what Sarah said, a lot of the influence of success is based upon the demeanor of the rider. So if we went now and left and it's raining, turn your windshield wiper on, it goes from one side to the other. And I'm going to call this a spectrum. This side is tension, and this side is relaxation. Now, somewhere in here, you, the rider, have to control yourself. If you're too relaxed, and you come to the warm-up arena and I see you've had half a glass of wine and you're really relaxed, you'll be too relaxed. You don't have enough positive tension to bring you to a state where you will function quickly and make fast decisions. On the other hand, if you come to the arena and I see that you're very tense and I joke with you and she didn't get my joke. There's no smile, there's nothing. Not moving, you are in the extreme. You are now too far in tension. This is negative tension. So there's an optimal place to be somewhere for you. Me, I'm just a little over here in the positive tension spot. But be careful you don't go too far. You go too far, you can see this when people go around the arena. And here's a classic example. It's 8:30 a.m. It's at white fences. Wait, don't laugh. And it's African lion safari, feeding the lions time. Okay? And all of here, when the first time that happened, like, what is that? And it was very unnerving. Like someone's doing a priest in church test, like we're in Africa. That's a little unnerving. You have to be able to control that. Person comes around the arena, I'm easy going. I'm easy going. Right away. And I say good morning. You know what they say? Good afternoon. In the afternoon, I'll say good afternoon, and they'll say good morning. This is not good. So their level of focus has gone somewhere they're not with me. So if they're not with me, this poor horse is like, yeah, see me. Something's okay. So that's, you asked, but you asked, right? So that's not necessarily a positive. And then the other thing would be, the person that I said good morning to, maybe I'll try it twice. Good morning. Not good. Right? So they have gone into the focal extreme over here where I don't even know if they can like see me. I hope they see letters. So that was a good question. Oh, yes.
As a judge, what is your best test that you have to judge, and why?
Oh, good question.
That would be a pretty straightforward answer.
Could you repeat the question?
Sorry? Oh, best test judged.
That he's ever judged.
Laura Graves, Friday Night Freestyle, maybe 4 years ago, Vergades. Stefan Peters, maybe 3 years ago, Mopsy. Those two tests were really good as Grand Prix tests. And then there would be kind of like a handful of nice St. George Airline tests. I don't remember who it was.
And why?
And why?
There you go, I gotcha.
Really high quality. The high quality tests aren't a challenge to judge. They're actually very easy. You start, everything is correct. So when I give a mark, I start 0 and go up. So, like 0 to 60, right? So there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. Then you have to ask, how good is it, and why isn't it a 10? Okay, a little bit short in the neck. So there's an example why it's not a 10, right? Piaf, advancing ever so slightly. But it's still a great Piaf, it's a 9. So those high quality characteristics, absolutely nothing is incorrect. It's just how correct is it? So those are really the thrilling tests to judge. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, for the low-level amateur who's finally starting to feel contact, but is still struggling with the half halt, because that's so important with the transitions. When does that come upon? I mean, but where is it in the body? How can you describe it in the body for that half halt? Because that's really great. See?
Are you the one right now? Yes, you are. So if I was riding in PPR Rodeo and I won, they're going to give me this big belt buckle, okay? So this big belt buckle is going to be right here. And I'm going to call this the nucleus of my half halt. So it's going to start here in my core. I'm going to tighten my abdominal structure, lateral obliques, lower back, and I'm going to sink my seat bones into this out. I want to do this in a soft way to start with, to get a feel for the horse, how they will react. I'll close my legs to keep them straight and tending to go forward. I will close my hand on the rein, preferably in a symmetric way. If they stiffen and resist that, I might have to give some suppling asymmetric aids. and I will resist their forward motion momentarily. When I make a half halt, I want to feel three things. One, always a response. I am being acknowledged. They listen. Even if it's just like they slow down a little bit, so I can verify and say, yep, he listened. Two includes one. Supple over their back, neck, and pole, and accepting the bit. Two includes one. Three, most important, but where you said you're coming from, you'll be going in this direction. So three, I have my response, I have that round, soft top line, and I'm able to supple their lower back and lower their hip. And then I want to give, relax, and repeat that. And that is the cycle. And how do I train that? Walk, halt, walk. Walk, nearly halt, walk. Walk, trot, a step or two, walk. Anybody that's had a lesson knows it. Walk, trot, a step or two, right? Verify. You still listening? You still listening? And when you go through a sequence, then walk, trot, walk. That's a lot of transitions. And you teach the horse how to supple their lower back so they can lower their croup. You have to teach them that. They don't come automatically doing that. It's rare. You have to help them with that. How? Transitions. 80% of the Grand Prix special test is a transition of some sort. This is the most difficult test to ride. And when you've ridden Grand Prix, and let's say you ride 15 and when you get brave and then do the special, you will die. Because it's a stamina test. And there's 36 movements. And you'll get to like number 29, like, are we done yet? You're not done. And the horse will be like, we're done. So those transitions. Transitions is the you use to impart that knowledge of your half halt to the horse to get them to get it. Another question?
How much difference as a judge do you get when you get a breed of horse and you're naturally short, thick neck? And you're saying a short neck is a problem. Now this horse is not going to get any longer.
No.
He's, a Welsh cob or a...
Right.
And
Well,
he's going to have a short, thick neck.
Yeah. First of all, I would not have any bias as to what horse comes in the arena because, like Sarah, I've ridden a lot of cross. But the problem they're going to have is meeting the criteria. So a lot of these horses will have a problem with the extension. They won't have a problem with pirouettes. They won't have a problem with the piaffe if it's Grand Prix level. But they will have a problem with some of the extensions. So what ends up happening there is they can't meet the criteria to get that higher score.
No, but then she's talking more specifically like the neck. So once you say then it's a more overall picture from his tail to his poll.
You say, oh, well, he's got a short neck. So
well, you do have to take that into consideration. No, there used to be one horse in the circuit in Grand Prix that was like that, and his neck was short and it went up.
Yeah.
So this horse still could get 70%, but it wouldn't get beyond 70%. So it would come to a maximum result, but it wouldn't get any further. And that was partially one of the restrictions or reason why.
Yeah.
But that was a good question.
Yeah. And I would say this is something, when you ride horses, pick horses, or whether you get, like I have a client bring me a horse that, well, like I said, I love them, right? I have them jazz. Like you got a jazz and he has a short neck. So then it's really important that you maximize the length of your horse's top line. So like you said, if you have a Welsh cob, I've had Welsh cobs, I've had clients with Welsh cobs actually do FEI, I1. And she has to work extremely hard at making the entire top line long, right? So then when I'm helping or coaching that person in order to make him happy, it has to always appear, like you're riding to your hand, right? So I think for me, in my experience with different breeds, I've also ridden a Frisian Grand Prix, right? So I've ridden plenty that had short, really thick necks. You're still gonna get that comment. Because horses that naturally are built with a short neck, unfortunately one of the things they do when anything is difficult, as we all know, is they shorten their neck. That's one of the easiest things to do. Conformationally wise, if they do that, most of the time they also have something conformationally from behind the saddle back, right? So it's a combination. So that's where, as a trainer, it might take a little bit longer to make that horse really correct for that level because you have to prove him wrong, right? You have to give him any reason to say, well, it might physically have a short neck, but she has the longest length of top line. And remember when we say short neck, or when it says short neck on the test, that's their short version of what they can say, but it's not just their neck that's shortened, right? So when you're training the horse, you really have to think of them as this like rainbow unit, right? So, but it's not impossible.
That picture's not good. This is a low mark.
But it's a pretty picture.
That's a low mark.
It's a pretty picture.
The colors are great, but yeah.
Okay, and I think there was another question too back
Another
there.
question? Okay, one other thing that I do want to make sure that I do cover would be, as a competitor, you should know and be able to recite in order with all the phrases.
Make Mandy do it.
The collective marks. You should know. So generally, everybody that I teach asks questions, and for some people it's annoying.
I just wanted the students to do it over
some
there.
people
That's
it's
all.
annoying. But I ask questions because your horse is always asking you a question, and whether you can answer the question correctly or not, what's important is that you think to find the solution. Because inside a lesson, I can give you the answer to the question that the horse is asking. Do I have to? Should I? So I can help you with that. But inevitably, you ride the test alone. It's a solo sport. So the collective marks at the bottom of the test, it's simply another way of describing the pyramid of training. So you should know this. You should be able to gaits, impulsion, submission, rider, effect. You should be able to, these are the categories. These are the phrases that go behind. You need to know that because you'll ride on your own, not in a lesson. Something will happen. Your horse is going to ask you a question. That's what something happens. And then you need to know what's the appropriate answer. Now, here's what's interesting. You don't have to be correct. You might be correct, you might be incorrect, but you have to make yourself guess. Because when you guess, that's called the process. It's the process of figuring it out. So everybody that I would teach, I'm always encouraging them to become fast, faster, fastest. Why? Because you have to be faster than your horse. If your horse has a certain personality, by the way, not all horses are Einsteins, so some of them are very, very intelligent, and they play chess. Other horses play checkers out front of Cracker Barrel. You'll see them.
Don't be judgmental.
So it's very, very easy to improve that horse that's not thinking so quickly. But then you'll have others that think very fast. Another thing to think about, to consider, when a horse spooks, do they send you a text message? You get like an email at 3:33.5, I'm going to. You don't, it just happens. So you have to have reflexive skills to be able to stay on control of that horse.
Okay.
Now, we can take that to a different version or a different idea, not that the horse is spooking, but what do you have to do when you passage and go into your first piaffe and your next passage? So what I've been mentioning to Sarah, I started to say a couple years ago, every time you piaffe this horse in the Grand Prix arena, all 3 piaffes will feel different for probably 2 years. And then it will start to smooth itself out and have some level of predictability. We can also say this about small tour with pirouettes. You go and ride the pirouettes, they never actually really feel the same very often. So what's your skill set? When you're inside a pirouette and you see that there's something happening and it's kind of going wrong, do you acknowledge it? Do you acknowledge it and do something about it? Or, the beginning of tonight's discussion, was there something the horse did that you saw or felt that led you to believe that this catastrophe is about to happen? Yes? Then you prevent it. No? You will then correct it. But you're correcting it. I saw it.
Okay, so I think to conclude, basically our thing on common mistakes, they start really early. They start in the basic canter, our favorite in the first halt. So when you guys are out there training this season, pay attention to the details, pay attention to the basics, and start to piece things together yourself. Oh, is that right corner difficult? I bet your right half pass is difficult. I bet your right pirouette's difficult. So a lot of those things that we're talking about are the basic things that any breed, any level, any horse can do and work on so that you avoid making those mistakes and don't let him see them once you go down center line. So any final questions? No? Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.